Hi everybody, this is our Sunday video for our Calculus Math 213 on September 6th, 2020. You'll see the background, which is my beloved home city of Kobe, and you will be learning about these objects here behind me as geometric objects this coming week. Right? But the big thing this week is of course, your exam. Okay, test number 1 is scheduled on Wednesday morning. And so I want to show you some of the items related to that test number 1 on Canvas. So let me share my screen, and hopefully you will pay close attention because I'll be saying a lot of important things about test number 1. Okay, so this past week, I am sure you have studied sections 2.3, 2.4, and 2.5, right? And so at this point, after the first 2 weeks of classes, you should have done pretty much, look through all the introductory things from the general information module, and then went on to chapter 2 and covered the first 5 sections. If we were meeting face-to-face, this is exactly where we would be today. Now, Monday is a holiday, our Labor Day. I hope you have a great holiday weekend and stay cool because it's extremely hot this weekend. And what's coming up is, so you have to turn homework number 1, and you should do so before your test number 1, okay, which is right here. And then you have show your work number for test number 1. Now, before this week is over, you should also complete the last 2 sections of this chapter. So chapter 2 should be completed by the end of this coming week as you finish your 2.6, that's quadric surfaces, and then 2.7 on cylindrical and spherical coordinates, all right? And so that's your assignment for this coming week. Not only do you take your test number 1, but you should do section 6 and section 7 of chapter 2. Now you can do this ahead of time if you'd like, okay? And then you can take your test. The test is on Wednesday. I cannot change that. But if you would like to study these ahead because you have some extra time, that's fine. If you think you want to spend all your time reviewing for test number 1 by going over these sections, and that's fine as long as you finish your 2.6 and 2.7 before this week is over. Okay, so what do you know about test number 1? Obviously, it is going to cover the first 5 sections. The topics will include things like the dot product, the cross product, vectors in general in 2 and 3 dimensions. The sphere, you remember the equations of spheres were covered. And then lines, planes, and distances, and angles. So the best way to study is really to go over these, and you have your homework problems from these. You can do extra problems by going to myopenmath.com and click on, get similar questions or something. But anyway, the homework is due before your test on September 9th, that's Wednesday morning. And then I highly suggest, although this is not required and you do not have to turn this in, you should look at practice tests. I have written these tests, practice tests, so that the test questions will look very much like what you'll be answering on the real test. Okay. Now the key is provided. This is a PDF file for the answers and step-by-step explanations for the questions in practice test. I also included about a half an hour review of a video of test number 1 practice test, okay? So you can use these resources as you prepare for your test number 1, all right? Now let's talk about the test number 1 in particular, all right? So hopefully you know what it's like to take an online test because you did your assignment, and that was like 5 silly questions. This time it will be very serious questions, okay? And I'll tell you exactly what kind of questions and how many questions and so on, all right? So let me tell you first that the test will not be available until 8 o'clock on Wednesday morning. Now, typically, I know that the scheduled time for this class is 8:25 to 10:50 a.m. on Mondays and Wednesdays, except for this holiday Monday, right? And that's because we have to have 2 hours and 25 minutes twice a week in order to comply with the state regulations concerning, how many units the class how many hours class has to meet in order to give you 5 units and so on. But an online situation, it's a little different. And so what I will do is, instead of 8:25 a.m., I'm going to have the test available starting at 8 a.m. on Wednesday morning, this coming Wednesday, the 9th of September. And as soon as you open this, you will have 150 minutes to take the test. Clear enough? And then once you take the test, somewhere, I think in the bottom of your test, the screen, it'll tell you how many more minutes and seconds you have to complete the test. I don't want you to rush through the test, because I think 2.5 hours is plenty of time to finish this exam if you know your content. But you will be given 2.5 hours or 150 minutes to take this exam, unless you have extra time accommodation through our disabled student DSPS office. And in that case, please send me your official copy of that letter as soon as possible so I can extend your time. And I have to manually adjust your time, the test for that. So let me know this in advance. Okay, now it is due at 11 a.m. All right, so what does it mean? So 11 a.m. is exactly 150 minutes after 8:30. Okay, so my recommendation is that I highly recommend that you start taking the test at 8 o'clock, in which case, the test will be closed at 10:30, 2.5 hours later, or no later than 8:30 a.m. That's when you should start taking the test, 8:30 a.m., because then it'll finish at 11 a.m. If you end up starting the test later than 8:30, okay, and if you take all your time, 150 minutes, then your test will be marked late, which you do not want to do. Right? So make sure you start your test at 8 o'clock or anywhere between 8 o'clock and 8:30 a.m. so that your test will not be marked late. I hope it's clear. Okay. Now, test number 1. So you will have 24 questions. All right. Let me explain. Test number 1. Question 1 is just a pledge. Question 1 is very much like your first question that you answered on the first assignment. Okay. So it'll basically ask you to state your name and your date. So you go into your response box and put your name and date. And I think all of you got this right. That is just to say that you are not going to be involved in any act of academic dishonesty. Basically, it's saying that I'm not going to cheat, okay? And by the way, as you take your test on Canvas, and I will be there on Wednesday morning with you as I look in Canvas and I can see your progress online, real time, okay? And in fact, if you close and open another browser, or if you go to another web page, the system will flag you and say, hey, look, something's going on here. So make sure I'm not going to have you turn on your webcam. I'm not going to proctor you by video, but make sure that you are, involved in test taking and test taking only, okay? So that's number 1. That's question number 1, which will be followed by 10 multiple choice questions. Get that 10 multiple choice questions, 3 points each. You do not have to show your work for those. You do not turn in any work regarding multiple choice questions. After the 10 multiple choice questions, you will have 12 free response questions. 12 free response questions worth between 5 and 7 points each, okay? And then after that, and by the way, many of them will say, not all of them, but many free response questions will say, leave the response box blank, okay? You do not have to write anything on the box. Which sort of, gives you this unpleasant consequence when you submit your quiz or the test at the end. Many of these will be flagged unanswered, because you didn't put anything in there. But that's okay. Just ignore the unanswered flags that will come when you submit your test. All right. So again, that's the 24. Oh yeah, the last question. Question number 24. Is basically to remind you, hey, make sure you show your work for test number 1, which is a different assignment. So it'll remind you to, close the quiz, which is to click on the submit quiz button at the bottom. And then you will have half an hour, 30 minutes to turn in your paper on which you are showing all your work for your free response questions for your credit or even partial credit. Okay, so I hope this is clear. And you're not going to be able to turn in your show your work, paper until you close the quiz by submitting the quiz meaning test number 1. And then you'll have half an hour to open. Let me just show you. Here is your test number 2, right? And maybe I should have said this earlier. Your test number 1, and that's where you can spend your 2.5 hours. And once you submit this, you can scan your paper and open this one here, and it'll have a upload button where you upload your test number 1, show your work for test number 1, which is your scanned copy and the PDF copy, not the JPEG, not the picture file, but the PDF file showing all your work. Okay, it is very important. In fact, there will be more points here in the free response section than in the multiple choice sections. So make sure you do that. And if you have any questions about this procedure, please let me know in advance before you take your test. Again, many boxes will be left blank. So you will have the flag saying that you did not answer these questions, but that's perfectly okay. Just sort of ignore that. Okay, and I have, as you know, this practice test. So many students wonder, what's the test going to be like? What kind of questions, right? Well, you probably know what kind of questions I will have, right? Because I have this practice test number 1, and the key and the video. And if that's not enough, you can just go over these questions that I am asking you in the first 5 sections. There should not be any surprises. I don't think you will find, any sort of surprise questions. Just study the first 5 sections. Okay, and then, I have weekly office hours, Mondays and Thursdays, 1 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. Well, Monday, it's a holiday. Clearly, I am not going to have this on Monday, the holiday, and Thursdays after your exam, right? So I will have a special office hours this week, Tuesday. I'm not sure exactly what time, but I will be sending an announcement soon, or maybe at the same time as this video, showing you when my office hours are on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, just special this week. Okay. As you know, the only synchronous time we meet is these exams, okay? We had our day number 1, the first class meeting was synchronous, and that's it as far as synchronous Zoom meetings are concerned. The tests will be taken simultaneously. Everybody will be taking it about the same time in the 3-hour window between 8 and 11 a.m. But other than that, you should be watching videos whenever you can and doing your homework. Again, if you have any other questions about how to carry on this, this course, please let me know. All right, so just to wrap up, the things that you submit on Canvas, in Canvas for this entire course, what do you submit? Basically homework sets, there's a homework set every time you take your test. So do the homework and submit your paper. I am not going to be checking for correctness of your answers because you can check all the answers yourself. I am just going to go through your homework very quickly to make sure that you have completed all the assignments, and that's really going to be graded on completeness. All right, so your homework for each chapter is due on the day of the exam. This time it's only the first 5 sections, and then your tests are online, and of course you submit the show your work part under the an appropriate assignment called SYW, show your work, for test number 1 this week. And then your practice tests are not to be turned in. They are completely optional. You just do the practice tests, and in fact, you don't even have to do them if you don't want them to. I strongly urge you to take your practice test and study those questions carefully, because your test questions will be very much like those questions. All right, and other than that, just check your Canvas shell. You have all sorts of interesting things in here, and what's coming up. Make sure after you take your test, or before you take your test number 1, make sure you complete your chapter 2 this week by studying 2.6, which is a long section, by the way. And you'll see why I have these these structures in the background of my my hometown there. And then test the section number 2.7. That's not a very long section. That's a sort of a quick section with 2 videos. All right, and then the following week, not this coming week, but the following week, we'll go into chapter 3. That's short, and we'll do the entire chapter in 1 week. Okay, but today, right now, your focus should be what's coming this week, which is your chapter test, the first test of calculus. All right, calculus 3. So make sure you study, study hard. I know you will. And so if you have any questions, please let me know. By the way, I told you I will have a special Tuesday office hours through Zoom. But if those hours do not work for you, you know, feel free to contact me, and I can still meet you, you know, like in one evening or early in the morning or late afternoon on some other day, if that's better for you. All right, so have a good weekend, stay cool, and then I will see you later. Okay, bye.